How you going, everybody, and welcome into the NFL Brekkie Show for Week 13. We are more than two-thirds of the way through the NFL regular season. Alongside Laurie Horesh, I'm Phil Murphy, and we are taking you up to kickoff from Duval, Jacksonville. The Jags, top spot in the AFC South, looking to take another step in a very crowded one-seed race. Going up against the Bengals, Jake Browning's second career start, certainly an unknown factor there under center for Cincinnati. That game kicks off on ESPN1 if you're watching in Sydney and Melbourne at 1:15 noon, whilst on ESPN2, there is the in-season tournament doubleheader, Celtics-Pacers and Pelicans-Kings. But, Laz, this is an NFL show, and looking at this one-seed race right now in the AFC, at the moment, no team has better than a 30% chance, according to ESPN Analytics, to secure that one seed. The Jags today are at 19%. That goes up to 25%. There are four teams: as Kansas City, Baltimore, Miami, and Jacksonville. Everybody between 20 and 30% as we enter the final 5 weeks of the regular season.
The chaos that has ensued from this, and we get a good morning legends from Benny G, from this week 13, whether it has been on the AFC side of things, or the worldly wild card race has completely blown open, and the Buffalo Bills, absolute winners, sitting back and watching just the teams in and around them, particularly those. Look at some of those results in the AFC North, just recapitulate. Unfortunately for them, one of the teams at 6-5 out of the Texans and Broncos had to win that one, unless a tie ensued. But other than that, everything falls their way. This is poised to be an absolutely phenomenal race to the playoffs. I was sitting there talking to some of the other guys in the ESPN Sydney office, the newsroom, yesterday, and that while it feels like, yes, one of the narratives, although it's been blown up, I think, with the 49ers performance against the Eagles, is that are there any really great teams this season? The other side of that coin is that it is so balanced. I think we're in absolute position to see wildcard teams get hot late in this run-up, really change their perception going into the postseason and threaten to cause boilovers in that opening wildcard weekend. And that's not just on the AFC side. The NFC side of things, we'll touch a little more deeply on what we saw from the 49ers and the Eagles. The fact that the three teams some of the three teams outside the 49ers in the NFC that we've talked about near the top of that conference, the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Detroit Lions, have had their defenses really exposed, if not just this past week, in recent weeks. We talked about the Lions a little bit about that, conceding more than 26 points. I think it's 5 out of the last 6 contests now after their narrow victory over the New Orleans Saints. What's happened? We felt like this was coming from the Eagles, that a performance where that secondary and even the run defense had started to show cracks, well and truly blown open by the 49ers. And the Cowboys could not stop Geno Smith, and in particular that wide receiver core from Seattle on Thursday Night Football. Feels a while ago now. They get out of there in a 70-plus point barn burner. But again, we're seeing, considering what the 49ers showed us, those teams there showing the defense is really workable. And then just look at some of the teams positioning themselves in that wild card race. And we'll touch on a couple of them. But you see a team like the LA Rams coming along in the NFC side of things. See a team like the Green Bay Packers coming along the NFC side of things and really putting up impressive. It's both individual players stepping up, whether it's your Puka Nakuas of the world, Jordan Love, touch on Matthew Stafford, Christian Watson having a moment before, we saw him pull up a little lame, coursing across the field with that explosive speed, or it's the actual scheme in the units that whether you want to call it the Shanahan tree, the LaFleur tree, whatever it is, the McVay tree, but that type of scheme having massive success in this week. So look, I think if you don't have a feel, we got Benny G wants to know, Laurie, you're looking sharp, mate, coming straight from a New York catwalk.
I knew you were.
Thank you. Sorry, let's just pause. Time out, everybody. It's chaotic here. I've brought a little chaotic pattern here, but I'm glad it's being well received by Benny G there. Phil, sorry, did you have a rebuttal to that, my friend?
Oh, no rebuttal at all. But I was watching the comments filter in as you were talking, and please do comment. This is the People's Show. If you have any thoughts, topics you want us to hit on, any questions, fire away. But I saw that one come in, and I said, I knew immediately Laura was going to put that on screen. Didn't matter if we had anything to top what you were saying. But Laz, to build on your point, I mean, on this show in the NFC wildcard, we talked about, the field is set. I said the Rams and Packers aren't getting back into this, and lo and behold, Matthew Stafford rediscovers his form from their Super Bowl run. We'll touch on that more coming up. Jordan Love I know some people, QBR is a tough stat to grasp because there's not really a calculation for it, but scale of 1 to 100, percentile of times you would win with that performance. Jordan Love, back-to-back 90-plus QBR outings, the only quarterback all season to do so. He did it in the last 2 games, the last of which less than 24 hours ago against one of the best defenses in the NFL, and the Packers just marched up and down the field at Lambeau. Now they occupy the final wild card spot. Seattle 2 removed. They're on the wrong side of a tiebreaker to the Rams. It's all opened up there. And Laz, you talk about wild card teams that can make a run. Philadelphia, who it seemed had some breathing room as the 1 seed, they lose to San Francisco. Now, if they lose in Dallas, where they're 3.5-point underdogs this week, the Eagles are the 5 seed in the NFC. They don't get a home game. Forget bye. They wouldn't get a playoff home game should they lose to Dallas and the playoffs start, though their run-in is a little bit easier than the Cowboys. And in the AFC, similarly, you mentioned the results for the Bills. Second, third life for them on a bye, watching everything ahead of them crumble. Now the Bills are only 1 game back of a wild card spot. They are tied with the Broncos. They lose the tiebreaker based on head-to-head. But the dream scenario for them, that AFC North, those 2 spots occupied by the Browns and Steelers, now a lot of doubt that either of those teams can hang on to their spot.
Yeah, and with the Eagles and the Cowboys, it's fascinating. We've got the news that dropped not too long ago. Adam Schefter tweeting out there that Shaquille Leonard has chosen his side in the NFC East battle. He will be a Philadelphia Eagle, former All-Pro linebacker, appointed defensive player of the year.
I mean, he was magnificent coming into the NFL.
This guy was in the conversation for defensive player of the year during his time with the Colts. He joins the Eagles, both teams needing help at linebacker. Both teams, I've mentioned before, the defenses having their woes in recent times after some stronger performances earlier in the season. So he's made his pick here, just adds spice to an already heated rivalry. We know, I don't think we're going to get a lot of words out of Mike McCarthy from this week, but wouldn't be surprised if we hear something from Nick Sirianni as we go into this contest. I do see, Benny G, you fired in a sensational take there on the Dolphins. I'm going to save that one for the hot take hotline, which comes up shortly in the rundown because it's a juicy one there that we'll touch on that does feature Niners chat and a little bit of Dolphins chat as well. But I think ultimately in this I've used the word chaos, but in this very murky playoff picture that we've got laid out in front of us, and that extends into awards as well. The MVP race is all over the shop as well. I think what we can do, Phil, is provide a service to the NFL viewers here. Perhaps your team's, hopes at a playoff run or a Super Bowl championship, the window has closed. Perhaps that's not on offer for you this season. Maybe your fantasy season has gone down the gurgler and you're looking at just trying to stave off a toilet bowl appearance. And you need to know what you need to watch, Phil. What are the must-watch items when I tune in, whether that is a Monday morning early or it's prime time, lunchtime on a Tuesday or a Friday. We've got weekend games coming up, so make sure you stay tuned to the schedule there. Know when you're going to see all this NFL action on ESPN. We want to provide just a few totally under the radar, but a few things that you really need to keep an eye on. Some units, some players that are just playing must-watch football, and that if you are looking to dive in as this season gets down into the nitty-gritty, I'm not going to tell you that you need to watch the Patriots play week in, week out, because I think there's better uses of your times. The Panthers, unless you're just watching them to lose.
Your son Charlie misbehaves, Laurie. You make him watch 60 minutes of Patriot football, and he'll get right in line.
Even for a team like the Panthers, you're not even in that position where you can watch them and hopefully gleefully watch them lose to back into a top overall pick, because we know where that pick is going. There are teams that are not offering the best product, but we are here to shine the magnifying glass and illuminate some of the units, some of the players that are definitely worth your 2 eyeballs whenever it is you got them squared up on some NFL action. So, Phil, I'll kick to you first. Who's the must-watch?
You didn't exactly give me a smooth handoff there, Laz, because the unit that I'm saying you must watch, or should you flick on ESPN, is worth paying attention to, is playing against the Patriots this coming week, Friday morning on ESPN, the Week 14 opener. And listen, we talked about the struggles offensively of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are real. They've been outgained in every game but one this year, yet somehow they occupy a playoff spot in the AFC, though they are loosening their grip at 7-5. And now with Kenny Pickett undergoing a procedure to address a high ankle sprain, they're hoping to get him back for a Week 18 finale against Baltimore, if that game is of consequence, which, of course, in Pittsburgh, they want it to be. Until that time, the offense is in the capable ? Hands of of Mitchell Trubisky. George Pickens was targeted all of 3 times after the first drive. All of 2 times after the first drive. Targeted 3 times on the first drive, couple nice catches, and then only 2 times the rest of the game. In a game they were trailing. It was in a biblical rain in Pittsburgh. They had to stop it twice for lightning. But still, the Steelers are a team in playoff position. They will be on ESPN air a couple times here on out. So for me, the unit worth watching is actually when the offense doesn't have the ball. It's on the defensive side. It's their tandem of edge rushers, which for my money, and there are certainly a number of in this conversation, I give them the nod as the best edge rushing duo in the NFL today. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith. Alex Highsmith signed a lucrative 4-year, $70 million extension. TJ Watt, we know about him, Defensive Player of the Year. In the past, he's a guy who tied the sack record, and he was on pace, only had half a sack this week, so kind of receded his pace. But still, these two combined for 20 sacks this season. The rest of the Steelers team has 14 total. That 20 sacks between Watt and Highsmith trails only Khalil Mack and Bosa in LA for highest among a duo in the NFL. This is a team that's 6th in scoring defense points allowed, 7th in opponents' passer rating. They diffuse opponents' offenses, but they do in such a way that's aesthetically pleasing. So when the Patriots line up offensively Friday morning and they put the offense in offense, you're going to see on however many plays the Patriots run, let's say 50 of them, number 90 on one side, Alex Highsmith on the other, doing really athletic things to get to the quarterback, whether it's Bailey Zappi, it seems, under center, or Mac Jones for the Patriots, wreaking all kinds of havoc. It is beautiful defensive football. So that is what to watch for in the games in which the Steelers are on your television.
That is yeoman's work. That is tough, gritty, analytical service you are providing. You are really, it is that time of the season. The grind is real, and you are finding diamonds in the rough. You are taking, there's other metaphors that aren't family friendly that I'm not going to use here, but I think you could probably let your imagination run wild on what they might be. But you are really finding something that ain't looking too sharp in the mirror and putting a little shine on it. And saying, hey, look, and I think given what's going on with Cleveland and the trajectory that the Browns are currently on, how that could impact Myles Garrett's chances in the Defensive Player of the Year, stakes TJ Watt well and truly in there. So worth keeping tabs on him, worth keeping an eye on him and his duo there.
0 sacks against the Rams offense laws this past week. And so Garrett's, it's not like he exactly helped his stock for DPOY.
Yeah, as someone who started the Browns in fantasy this year, I can confirm that stat is absolutely true. Benny G has some thoughts. Phil, my Steelers stink. Tomlin needs to go and take the QBs with him. And
Tomlin needs to go?
Benny,
Tomlin is there's a long list of problems in Pittsburgh. Tomlin is not one of that. He's a Hall of Fame coach.
Benny's ready for the full water boy treatment here. We need to play our defense as the offense, and we might make the finals. Get TJ, the full Bobby Boucher, get TJ Watt out there whenever you can.
Hey, JJ Watt was originally a tight end at University at Central Michigan, so maybe TJ Watt has some hands. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we saw JJ Watt flash those hands in the NFL during his prime, getting some goal line snaps and some touchdown receptions out of that alignment. And Brad, friend of the show, Brad, Hall of Famer, in the audience. Good morning, gents. I found a positive for the Panthers season. Only 5 games left to watch. Yeah, I
thought they were going to mess around and pull one out in Tampa. I did. Dear. Again, it felt like it was raining everywhere yesterday, by the way. I live in the U.S. It was raining here in New England. It was raining in Pittsburgh. It was raining in Central Florida and Tampa. Everywhere.
It was hot yesterday. We cleared our thunderstorms the day before. All right, if I'm going to run, I had a two NFC teams I was tossing up here, and given we're going to talk about one of these in a little bit, I'm going to pivot quickly, and I'm going to go to the Green Bay Packers. This offense is must-watch football. Jordan Love is playing such confident. I use poise, and I'm going to leave poise as the word that we showered CJ Stroud with earlier in the season. I don't want to just say, oh, look, another young quarterback that's, let's use the word poise, but the confidence with which he's playing, yes, it's encapsulated in the Romeo Doubs 4th down, chuck it up into quadruple coverage and pray that no one wearing a Kansas City Chiefs uniform thinks that we might want to turn our heads and locate the football in the air. Chris Collinsworth threw out on the call. He's like, look, there's just no way you can defend that play. I would posit that turning your head and locating the football in the sky might be a way to help you achieve that goal. But Chris Collinsworth knows more about football than me. As we talk about the Packers, though, the designs, the way they attack both vertically, laterally, they're sending those Kansas City Chiefs linebackers and off-ball players in all sorts of different directions, the use of Christian Watson, the use of those young wide receivers, the confidence that Jordan Love plays with, he's playing within the system, but he's also trusting in those moments to throw up those touch passes for jump ball situations in the red zone. The fact that we're seeing A.J. Dillon seemingly running with power, balance, and vision again, which has not been his calling card, at least not all three of those at the same time, in what seemed to have been a disappointing trend that his production had gone through. Aaron Jones not being featured, and struggling to find health this season, providing that opportunity. And we're having those Dillon moments where it seems to course through, and complementary offensive. We talk about complementary football between different units, but complementary offensive football, when you look in that LaFleur system, we're getting that power running game going and creating yards after contact and stressing defenses that way. And then that young receiving core, Musgrave's out, but Tucker Kraft has come in and really, really performed at a high tier and well beyond what you might expect from a rookie tight end. The list of young receivers that are contributing, Watson gets a lot of the pub, but what we've seen from Wicks and what we've seen from just week by week, it's different players getting featured. Reed is having absolute moments there. It just, the buy-in and the energy that came through the TV screen, watching them execute. And look, from a young team, there's going to be sloppiness at times. Like the jump from college to NFL is real, but as we get into this back run now, and with the place the Packers have positioned themselves, whether that you're looking at within the division or the wild card race, they must watch football. That offense is absolutely enthralling, and Jordan Love is playing football at a top 10 clip and has been doing it for the last 4 to 6 weeks. Do not turn away from a Packers team that the only thing that I think neutral fans could resent about them now is that you thought maybe for a second that they were going to hop off the multiple decade train of elite quarterbacking with some of the struggles that they had earlier this season. No. It looks like they may very well have not stumbled into, but the plan has come to fruition that they're going to go 3 for 3 in this quarterback dynasty they've set up there in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and Laws, I mentioned it off the top, the 90 QBR in back-to-back games for Jordan Love. He's the only quarterback this season to do that in any game. And some said, he feasted on a Detroit defense that's underperforming on Thanksgiving. Sure. He feasted on a very capable Kansas City defense yesterday and a Steve Spagnuolo-led defense that is great at making in-game adjustments. They didn't have an answer for Love. And a couple of things I want to point out quickly to support your stats. Christian Watson, 70% completion rate during this 3-game win streak, 70% completion rate on targets, 62 yards per game for Watson. But specifically what I've liked about Love is younger quarterbacks tend to struggle when you bring pressure, when you bring blitzes. Love this season, 8 touchdowns, no picks against the blitz. Only Tua Tagovailoa has more touchdowns without an interception. And against man defense, Love in this game, I believe all 3 of his touchdowns were against man. 18 touchdowns this season, no interceptions against man defense, whereas against zone, he struggled. 4 touchdowns, 10 picks. Well, next week they play the Giants, who play man at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. So I'll tell you this, I'm covering the game, and some new ESPN policies won't allow me to have any vested interest in that Packers-Giants game from sight. But I will tell you now, and I'll tell you on the Brekkie Show next week when I'm outside the stadium, that I expect Jordan Love to have a big game for that exact reason. 18 touchdowns, no interceptions against man defense. The Lions played man at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. I don't think this train's over yet, but he does play a lot of zone-heavy teams over the final 4 weeks, so be mindful of that if you are looking to watch the Packers. Things are going to get a little bit more complicated for him, but I do expect the Packers at 6-6 and occupying the final playoff spot in the NFC by way of a head-to-head win over the Rams at 6-6. I do expect them come this time next week to be 6-6 on their way to 7-6 and taking one more step toward a wild card, which for me, year one under Jordan Love is ahead of schedule.
All right, Phil, that's a lot of love for Jordan and his Packers offense. Who's the other must-watch team that you're imploring people to tune in, or the must-watch unit, must-watch player that you're imploring people to cast your eyes towards down this final month, 2 months of the regular season?
Well, this one on the surface, it's not going to blow you away, and it's the guy who, this side of Jerry Rice, seems the likeliest to contend for an MVP at the wide receiver position. Never has an NFL MVP gone to a wide receiver, yet here we sit into December. Tyreek Hill is 299 yards. We'll make it clean. 300 yards clear of any other receiver in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb, who's been magnificent, is number 2, 299 yards adrift. What I'm saying about watching Tyreek Hill, why he's must watch, because typically he runs off screen and Tua throws it, and number 10 makes an adjustment in the middle of the route and runs underneath it. It's like a Madden video game. It's just you can run around and get under the ball. But watching Tyreek pre-snap is what's intriguing because of how other defenses have to shift and move. And on his second touchdown, Tyree was on a knee. He was lined up as a tight end on a knee, looking at Tua, got a nod, went in motion one way, went back in motion the other way, was in a full sprint by the time the ball was snapped. You go to NFL Next Gen Stats, they show his route tree. There is no rhyme or reason or consistency. It is impossible to prepare for it. It's why he's seeming very likely, barring injury, to be the first receiver ever to get 2,000 yards. And people may criticize what will be a record for receiving yards in the season. Oh, he's got the 17th game. I would reckon he's going to beat the mark by the end of game 16. I think he's at that kind of pace. And you look specifically what he does on downs of consequence. He had 5 catches for 157 yards, 2 touchdowns against Washington. Laz, all 5 catches, all 157 yards. Both touchdowns came on third down. So these downs of consequence, 157 yards in a game on third down, we haven't seen that in the NFL in 15 years. T.O. in 2008 was the last to do it. Yes, he was going against probably the worst pass defense in the NFL in Washington. They allowed the worst passer rating to opposing QBs prior to the 45-14 Miami win. It's only gotten worse, but that was Tyreek Hill at his best against a team that was susceptible. And as Miami will be featured heavily down the stretch as they look to lock up an AFC East title, vie for a 1 seed that we've already said is wide open. When they have the ball, number 10 pre-snap, watching him run around, how it affects opposing defenses, and how that Miami offense takes advantage of it is must-see every snap of the ball.
Cannot be lost in the MVP conversation, which has
$19 right now. I don't think he's going to get it.
Nope.
But $19 for the impact he's having, where nobody else seems to want to take the reins. Jalen Hurts slipping off. I mean, Brock Purdy might
Patrick
get it by default if San Francisco ends up with the 1 seed. But I don't know if there's anybody more valuable to what an offense does than Tyreek Hill.
I feel like we've had years in the past. We mentioned JJ Watt's name a couple of times already in the show, but I think back to the 2013, 2014 season where it felt like surely this is the year a defensive player could do it with the level that JJ Watt was performing at. So we've had that. It's almost a decade since we had that conversation. But look, Tyreek Hill needs to be in that. The way they use Tyreek Hill, the different alignments, having him in motion, having him set up in different spots to attack the defense in different ways, you should pay attention because the rest of the NFL is paying attention. So many teams are borrowing and looking at Miami at how they free up this weapons. Look, Tyreek Hill doesn't need a whole lot of help to get open, but it doesn't hurt to help your elite talent become even more productive. Teams are borrowing from this. The Dallas Cowboys have changed how they use CeeDee Lamb. The best receivers in the NFL, there used to be a time where the best receivers typically played that X role on the outside. They landed up outside of really vertical concepts, and that's how you dominated out there. And that was kind of the archetype for those number 1 wide receivers. The age we're in with the NFL now, the concept of a slot receiver is far more open. Coaches more open-minded for where they deploy, and you're actually seeing efficiency. You'll see players season to season. Okay, we're going to have a season. We're going to get him into this because of the coverage he's seeing. Let's get him into the slot. Let's free him up. Let's change the release options open to him. And then that opens up in campaigns after that. Hey, we've done it this way. Now we're going to do it this way. It just really spreads out. So other teams are looking at what Tyreek Hill, how he's being used by Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins and the brains trust over there. You should be too, because it's incredibly. It's casting forward to what we can see from the rest of the NFL. All right, let's keep this thing going with my last one. The cardiac Colts are, with Gardner Minshew stepping in after Anthony Richardson went down, and providing far more entertainment, far more winning at 7-5 now, but far more entertainment than I think even Colts fans, the most optimistic, would have hoped for. Out of the last 6 games, 5 of them, they scored 27 or more points. The one that they didn't was against the New England Patriots, and we've seen how they can drag down perhaps the offensive entertainment in a contest.
Drag down the sport of gridiron football and bring it back to the 1930s? Is that where you were going there, Laz?
Sure, let's get historical with it. But yes, the Gardner Minshew-led team, it's not always consistently pretty, but with little Big Mike. If I think of Big Mike at the receiver position in the NFL, I'm thinking about Mike Evans and his 10 straight seasons of 1,000-yard production. Salute to you. I'm thinking of little Big Mike, thinking of Michael Pittman, who does some similar things on the field. look, the guy is a lock for 8 receptions week in and week out or more. The designs at the goal line for that game-winning touchdown between Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman, and the little hint shrug which way the route was going to go before coming screaming wide open at the back of the end zone from near the goal line. The fact that Alec Pierce is getting huge chunk plays, not just the touchdown, but in overtime, basically the game-sealing deep ball that he hauls in and scoots down the sideline and sets up that goal-to-go situation. The running game options that they have there between Taylor and Moss, who Moss will not go away. This is a team that attacks downfield, that Minshew is not an afraid quarterback, that Shane Steichen is just an absolutely superb offensive designer. I know you've got some thoughts on perhaps some honors that he may be in line for this season, but the Colts week in, week out, it's not just the fact that they're scoring points as a totality. We're getting multiple block punts. Now, so special teams is contributing, but they're in one-score games in every single week. Yeah. So when you are coursing through the NFL schedule, or you're wondering which highlights to take in or what games you want to check out, the Colts are guaranteed entertainment at this point. And I feel for them, we know what's coming back next year. We know that Steichen will be back. We know that some of this offensive talent they've invested in. You see what the future is for Michael Pittman. We've seen Josh Downs come along. And we know that Anthony Richardson is looming. And my thoughts on him have been very, very clear throughout this year. Fortunately, lost to injury far too soon this season. We'll see him back next year. This is like watching a really great band the year before you know they're going to break out. You know that the front man is going to change. You know that they're going to get a new lead singer, but you can see the set list is super tight. You can see the drums are on point. You can see the relationship. And my musical knowledge is absolutely shocking, particularly practical musical knowledge. But the relationship between the lead guitar, the rhythm guitar, the bassist, it's all there flowing. This is early LA Guns situation there before the merger there and what became Guns N' Roses out of Google LA. Confirmed by Google, because whilst my music taste predates my birth year, my knowledge does not. But all in all, I think this is a phenomenal time to get a real feel for what Steichen is doing, for the pieces in place when Richardson comes in next year and adds another layer to the AFC South, which, are we talking about an AFC South team that could have between the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Texans? Are they really going to make a run at three playoff teams out of the AFC South? So that's my last one as we keep this thing moving. Any thoughts on Steichen and his friends down in Indy, Phil?
Well, Laz, I mean, we're all plugged into markets and betting markets and whatnot. The Colts have the highest hit rate of second half overs in the NFL. So the volatility you get after halftime from them. But this win over the Titans. It was the first time they came back from 10 points down at any point and won a game this season. First time they came back from down at the half and won this season. It was the first time that the Titans in Derrick Henry's career had ever lost a home game in which he had multiple touchdowns. And the Colts, for everything, it was like it should have been a throwaway season. Richardson goes down. Jonathan Taylor's holding out. He was injured in this game, didn't play. Yet here's Gardner Minshew, the mustached gunslinger, passes of 35 or more air yards. He came in with 2 such attempts all season, went 1 for 2. He was 2 for 3 in this game, including the long pass to Alec Pierce to set up the game-winning touchdown to Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman goes for double-digit catches and triple-digit yards, back-to-back games. Only 2 guys in franchise history had ever done that before him. Marvin Harrison Sr. and the Hall of Famer Raymond Berry. Go look at his 1960 season to talk about like what kind of numbers he was putting up, especially against your Cowboys. He had a crazy game against them. So, Laz, there's rapport developing with a guy who's not going to be the QB1 of the future, but Gardner Minshew continues to win himself work, whether in Indianapolis or elsewhere. And you mentioned it, Shane Steichen, for me, is getting slept on for Coach of the Year. I'm not saying D'Amico Ryans is ill-deserving by any means, but Steichen isn't being talked about in the same breath. The Colts remain ahead of the Texans on the AFC wildcard ladder, and they've dealt with more injury to this point, and they have an easier run of schedule on the way out. So for me, now's the time to tune in and pay attention to the Colts, because not just are they sitting there and how did they get there? They play kind of a chaotic, fun brand of football for the neutral. And that's what you said, the cardiac Colts, that whatever you want to say about them, they are in the picture, in the mix. And over the last 5 weeks, they're a team that if you do find yourself watching a game, it is must-see, especially after halftime, because for whatever reason, all the scoring amplifies in the final 30 minutes.
All right, from chaos to just heating it up in the oven, in the kitchen. There, it's time for the hot take hotline, brought to you by Macca's. We had a few heat seekers sent in, and Boyd, pumped up by Benny G dropping one in from the comment section, what we get to. But first hot take off the press here that we need to cast our eyes over. Tim Cummings, the Eagles will lose in their first game of the playoffs based on their defensive effort. Short, sweet, to the point. Phil, hot.
You lead off because I might have a hotter take than Tim here.
I think what Tim points to there, the defensive effort, is what I want to focus on here because it's something that I touched on earlier. Defense is a huge question mark for a bunch of these NFC teams under the 49ers. I know the Eagles still sit atop on the record, but in terms of looking at power rankings and stock market, the 49ers are the clear dominant team in the NFC right now, and they put distance there. The Eagles secondary is a massive struggle. The spine of the defense, particularly from the linebacker to the safety area, has long been a concern, and it has some of the picks and free agent additions that they made in the offseason have not come to consistent fruition. They've had health stuff at that spot as well, with likes of Nakobe Dean struggling to find health over his time in the NFL. I think that when you do look at some of the teams in the NFC standings side of things, I mentioned the Rams and the threat that they could pose. You talk about a team like the Green Bay Packers and the threat that they can pose. The Detroit Lions not lacking for offensive output, but that's not likely with how the standings are. Even with the way that a team like the Packers is coming on, we still anticipate with a 3-game lead the Lions to take out the NFC. So that's not the first week of the playoffs. But if you're looking at wild card considerations, what the Rams or the Packers in particular could throw towards the Philadelphia Eagles in week 1, is it enough to knock them off? Perhaps if they catch absolute fire. I still think the Eagles, the offensive line, the level, the problems that Jalen Hurts presents week in, week out, not against the 49ers perhaps, but genuinely with his dual threat play. Yes, tush push gets headlines, but the way that he can revert to different parts of his game when people are trying to take away the running element from him, the growth he's shown as a passer, when people threaten those passing lanes and really drop back, the ability he does have to tuck it, either creating with his legs as a runner or create second chance plays, second windows to pass. I still think the Eagles, let's not get to panic stations here. I still think they're a quality football team, a quality roster. They make the additional Leonard. We'll see the improvement that might provide at the linebacker spot. They still are good enough to make a run through and threaten to the deepest parts of the NFC side of things. But I think what he brings up there, while it's still a little too hot for me, it's a phenomenal entry. I think the defense part is very fair because there are a few teams, depending how seeding lands, with the way they're playing offensive football, that are absolutely going to challenge them. And this is a very different Eagles. What we didn't get to say about the Eagles last year, we have been able to say this year. They have played a lot of quality opponents and they've beaten a whole bunch of quality opponents. Whether it's by an inch or a mile, they have deservedly earned praise for their ability to gut out and win games against good teams and bad teams. Last year, we talked about the schedule, who they really played. It was a big question mark. Even through the playoffs, with the way things crumbled and the way it all landed, there was a question of who they actually beat in the playoffs. That's not going to be the case this time. They will be challenged. I don't think we can expect blowouts for the Eagles in the playoffs because of the level that the defense is playing. Whether those teams themselves are complete enough to challenge and topple them in week 1, I'm a little more hesitant about.
Laz, Tim, I see your concern. I understand it. The Eagles gave up a yards after catch and yards after contact. The team that's known for yards after the catch, the 49ers, had a season high yards after the catch, and the highest Philadelphia has allowed since Laurie, exactly 3 years ago and plus 3 weeks or so. Andy Dalton and the Cowboys were the last time. December of 2020 were the last time that the Eagles allowed more yards after the catch. The yards after contact, it was San Francisco's second highest total of the season. This is known as a physical team that can get that extra yard, whether it's Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, guys who are all terrific at contact, balance, catching the ball, bouncing off somebody and going. San Francisco's second highest such total they've had all season. Most Phillies allowed since a game they actually won, but it was week 1 of last year, 38-35 shootout against the Lions, if you remember that, a real fun week 1 game for both teams, Eagles coming out on top. So, Tim, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, the Eagles' defensive lack of physicality, I don't know if Shaq Leonard is the answer. Will they lose the first playoff game? I say no, but I'm going to say no because I'm going to turn this up a little bit. I don't see the Eagles going to Atlanta as a wild card team and losing. I think the Eagles in the NFC wild card position at 5 are going to win that first playoff game. And then after that, there might be some concern because they'll certainly be playing the Cowboys or the 49ers after that. Tim, I'm concerned the Eagles aren't going to win this division. If they lose this week in Dallas, which I'm picking them to, and they are underdogs in that game, the Eagles are the 5 seed. Yes, from here on in, they have the easier schedule. I think they still play the Giants twice. God bless. But I do think Dallas, if they can get this win, they'll be buoyed by that result and finally, eschewing doubt that they can beat a team with a winning record, having beaten Seattle, and then with a win over Philadelphia, it's a short list of teams that you can make a bigger statement against than you do against Philadelphia. So for me, I do think this is a concern for the Eagles, and I do think it's going to cost them this game this week. I don't think they're going to lose the first playoff game, but I think they'll lose the second one.
All right, so the first one off the rank, Tim's take, getting a lot of love, a lot of merit, and a very topical team when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. We will see how that plays out with the run home. The last thing I'm going to predict, people are saying, if the Cowboys win this week and they both win out, this is how it all plays out. These are the tiebreakers. I'm not predicting either of those teams to win out down the way. No. With some of the, should we say, volatility on defense they've shown, but really some of the concerning signs that they've shown in recent weeks. Okay, next one off here is Dan. Pittsburgh might bottom out and draft Arch Manning first overall in a couple of years. Phil, Arch Manning is NFL eligible in what year?
Year of our Lord of 2026.
And Kenny Pickett's, how does that line up with one Mr. K. Pickett?
That is his 5th-year option, so they could pick him up on a 5th-year option or start Arch Manning as a rookie. Arch Manning is one of the highest-rated quarterback recruits to come out. He's the nephew of both Peyton and Eli Cupper Manning. The eldest Manning brother was a magnificent collegiate receiver, had to retire due to chronic neck injuries that also Peyton had similar issues with later on in his pro career. Arch Manning, currently at the University of Texas. He's their QB2, but has been getting time this year. He's not draft eligible in this draft 2024 or next draft 2025, but Pittsburgh bottoming out and looking to the future, fine. They're not going to bottom out this year. They're already 7-5, and I think 7 wins is more than we would have thought they've gotten. Even if you'd watched 60 minutes of every game and not looked at the scoreboard at any point, you would have thought, man, this team is a 4-win team. They've been very fortunate to get to 7 wins. Bottoming out in this league is tough because God bless you. Just when you think you hit rock bottom, you look over and somebody's got a shovel. Those somebodies now are the Panthers, who don't have a draft pick in the first round. The Patriots, the Giants are in that mix. The Jets are kind of slipping in that direction. The Cardinals were, and now they put together a couple results. One most recently at Pittsburgh's expense. They completely diffused Pittsburgh on the ground in the second half, and then James Conner, the revenge game, 88 of his 105 yards after halftime, a guy who not only played at Pittsburgh before as a pro, he played collegiately at Pitt, and he's from Western Pennsylvania. So a lot of emotion there for him. It's going to take a lot for Pittsburgh to get to rock bottom. And I know somebody's been criticizing Mike Tomlin in the comments. I think he's a surefire Hall of Fame coach, and I don't think he's going anywhere until he decides to. And I think that's a good thing for Pittsburgh. They took a quarterback late first round, and you and I both, Laws, have talked about it is a low hit rate from that 12 to 24 spot in the first round. It's hard to get a guy of note, and you're committing yourself to that quarterback for the next 3 or 4 years, and then you kind of get in this purgatory of 7, 8, or 9 wins where you're never really in contention, but you're also never really so bad that you're going to get an elite quarterback unless you get lucky and do what the Bears did and trade back in a draft, and the team with whom you trade back, they end up stinking and you take their first round pick. But you got to kind of get lucky to do that. So Pittsburgh's just in a funky spot. Denver's been in that for the last 7 years. We saw Cincinnati in that for a while earlier in this millennium. So I think this is a little too spicy for me, unless we're having this conversation in 2025, and then we can revisit it. And but I think whatever we're cooking on the grill, it might be a little stale by then.
All right, we got about 11, 12 minutes left on the clock here. So one quick one before we move on to the next segment. Benny G, Dolphins, the only team offense that can keep up with the Niners that he thinks, but they don't show enough when it's mattered against those big teams. Super Bowl is Niners to lose. Look, the Dolphins are certainly, with Achane back, with what we've seen from Raheem Mostert having a healthy year, the healthy year that was finally promised, finally delivered. And we spent time talking about Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle had a stone cold drop that comes to mind yesterday, but still such a threat. The way Tua is operating that scheme, Mike McDaniel, they're absolutely up there. I think there are some other offensive teams. Unfortunately for them, when you think about the best offense in the league and you think about the most productive, have a look at over towards the Dallas Cowboys. They showed mono and mono that they still haven't got it ready to step up and be ready for that fight and be able to go toe-to-toe with the 49ers. Look, the 49ers, you go, Phil.
I was going to say, I shared with you before the show, there's a prominent Vegas book that ranks all the teams on a neutral field. That book has the 49ers 5 points clear of anybody else on a neutral field. Number 2 is a tie between the Cowboys and the Dolphins, the two teams who 1 and 1A in scoring offense at this moment. So to support what you're saying, it seems like they're one of the few teams that can keep up with the 49ers on a neutral field. But can they match the physicality when the 49ers are healthy? Because of 3 games they lost in a row were without both Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel for the lion's share or totality of each of those games. With those guys there and those guys fit, teams not only haven't beaten the 49ers, they haven't been that close.
Niners versus Ravens in the Super Bowl. You heard it before week 1 here. I'll stay to it. And that would be an interesting matchup, not just because it was previous Super Bowl history of the Harbaugh when they went toe-to-toe, but really when you think about that Niners offense and a defense that can challenge them, both schematically and talent-wise, the Ravens do present a fascinating one. Okay, that closes out the Hot Take Hotline for today, Phil. We've got 10 minutes, so we're going to zoom through the final 2 segments here. And next up, a favorite one. As we go from, we've had must-watch, we've had hot takes, and now we're going to look at some perhaps players feeling a little resurgent and feeling the flow.
Yes, it's Feeling the Flow, brought to you by Pilot Hard Made Easy. And Laz, there's a 35-year-old quarterback in Southern California who was shipped there thinking maybe one run in him, and he got it. And the Rams win the Super Bowl by Matthew Stafford on their home field. Great scenes. Then they recede 2022. Well, Laz, we wrote them off this year a lot. I mean, I said they were on the short list of least talented rosters in the NFL. And here they are, right on the cusp of the wild card picture, and they're only out on the outside of a tiebreaker because of a game in which Matthew Stafford missed. They have rediscovered their offensive vigor, rediscovered their energy, and a lot of it has to do with the man in charge of the huddle. Matthew Stafford, in this win over the Browns, very capable defense. Yeah, he was largely kept upright, wasn't pressured at a high rate, wasn't sacked in a game. First time the Browns didn't get a sack this year. And a lot of that goes to a younger offensive line. Steve Avila out of Baylor, the 3rd-round pick, is playing at a Pro Bowl level. He played center at university. He's a left guard now, and he's playing very well. But in the times when Matthew Stafford was pressured, he had 91 pass yards. He had 2 touchdowns, numbers he hadn't seen under duress since the 2021 regular season when the Rams rode all the way to the Super Bowl. And in the last 2 weeks, Stafford has really found his old self. 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. Prior to that on the year, 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. 50-50 isn't what we're looking for at the quarterback position. 7-to-1 ratio now has the Rams thinking very realistic playoff aspirations.
Look, Matthew Stafford in the last fortnight, number 1 in EPA per play at the quarterback position. Number 3 when pressured, so doing it when he is facing those more harried looks. Number 4 in total QBR. The touchdown to interception ratio is phenomenal. And look, this is the neighborhood has changed for Matthew Stafford. It's a lot younger team. Lots of veterans have made their way out since the Super Bowl run. On defense, there's a ton of new faces. When you're drafting in the double-digit or dozen picks and they're all making the roster, it tells you the state of that. The cycle that team and that personnel is going through. And then his surrounding talent, Puka Nacua, even when he leaves the field looking like he's in agony, is back out on creating those sideline contortion catches, the burst he's showing upfield. Cooper Kupp, not at his perhaps most the healthiest, almost explosive we've seen him, but still coming up with big red zone plays there. And you hope that if they're going to make a charge at this down the way, that he does get the chance to provide some health. Maybe if they do find themselves in a game, they do have a very rocks and diamonds schedule the way. They've got some very, very tough matchups and some that are looking a little more coasty, at least on paper. Maybe you get some rest time in there for Cooper Kupp if you're able to build a lead. Tutu Atwell, who, if you throw him in your fantasy lineup, you're going to get left frustrated. You're not in a league that rewards points for pass interference because he does threaten that week in, week out. And then that run game, that scheme, it feels like that, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford are at the point. They're the older guys in the room, both in their 30s. They're seeing so many young faces around. They're at a different chapter of this Rams iteration together, and they kind of looked at a bit of a home improvement project to make together. Do we remodel the home? Do we refurbish? Do we bring some spice back into it and some color and some flourish back into our homestead together as the neighborhood starts to change and as we change and get older? And so far, we are seeing in recent weeks that is blossoming with time and health and all those reps spent together. We are seeing this Rams team that, from a talent and scheme standpoint, is threatening. They are one of the more, we mentioned must-watch earlier, they're one of the more must-watch teams, but there is nothing more beautiful than watching Matthew Stafford tall in that pocket, still with the arm talent, still with the arm creativity, the arm strength to find different layers of the field, attack in every different way. The man's got moves. The man can do it from all sorts of different platforms and angles. This is in some ways, still an unheralded master at his craft, and it's phenomenal to see him, yes, at age 35, but still show that explosiveness, that downfield attacking potential and potency that has been such a huge, characterization of his career in the NFL.
Yeah, Laz, and you mentioned Rocks and Diamonds. They play Washington at home. They visit the Giants, but then they also next week get Baltimore, who's rested. They're certainly going to be underdogs in that game. And then week 18 doesn't project as a dead rubber for the Niners, though it's possible. If that's the case, that would certainly help the Rams. There's a game in week 16, home to New Orleans, that I think is going to decide the Rams' playoff fate. If they can get to 9-8, having the tiebreaker over the Seahawks is massive. I think that's a position in which they could find their way in one of these last wild card spots. 8-9 is far less likely, especially as other teams, Green Bay among them, have entered the mix and entered the fray. But the fact that we're having a playoff conversation for a team that I wrote off at 3-6 3 weeks ago really speaks to how well he's played. But that's the nature of this league. Things are unpredictable. Laz, we do try and do our best with predicting. Popular demand brought to you by Tab. On the season, Laz, you and I are up 9.3 units, a number that has stagnated mostly because of me. I'm over my last 4. I've dropped from $10 to $6 even. I don't know what to do here. Man, I'm going to have you lead off. But the game, our featured game today for our popular demand brought to you by Tab, the Jags are 10-point favorites, $1.92 each way, which is actually a very good value for a major market like that. 40.5 is the total, $1.92 on either side of that. Monday Night Football unders, 13-1 this season. They've hit 11 in a row. The Jags are 7-1 against the spread in their last 8. Cincinnati's lost their last 14 road primetime games straight up. But home teams favored by 7 or more on Monday Night Football, 12, 21, and 1 in the last 34. So those numbers suggest take the Bengals and the points, take the under. Laz, you've been hot in this popular demand segment that we do every week. So I will let you lead off with your best tips.
All right, we've got a hard 2 minutes to get this one done before the studio erupts in fireworks of color and glory. So let's go with Trevor Lawrence here. Quarterback I have absolutely been a fan of, a defender of it. His number for this game is passing yardage is 260.5 yards in totality against a Cincinnati Bengals team that unfortunately is not going to be able to provide a lot of long offensive possessions for themselves, meaning there'll be plenty of opportunity for Trevor Lawrence. Cam Taylor-Britt, star young cornerback, is out for this one. He's made his way onto injured reserve, unfortunately. I see Trevor Lawrence sailing past that number. The last 3 quarterbacks to go up against this Bengals team, CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson, and yes, Kenny Pickett prior to the injury, have all gone past that. Mark Stroud in particular, in a big way. He was over 350 yards. I think you can absolutely move the ball against this Bengals team. It's down to just strain on a defense that is having to do a lot. It's not the best version of this Bengals defense. They're having to be out there a lot. Offense not able to sustain a lot of time possession on the field. So Lawrence, I see teeing off on this one over 260.5 as a hand back to you with a couple of minutes on the clock.
Laz, I mentioned unders 13-1 on Monday Night Football this season. Jags first half unders are 9-2 overall, including 5-1 in designated home games, 4-1 in North Florida where this game is. So I'm taking the first half under 19.5 points at $1.95. So as long as we don't get a 10-10 or 13-7, I'm hoping that Jake Browning and that offense gets diffused a little bit. I'll take 13-6. I'll take 14-3. Under 19.5 total points in the first half at $1.95.
All right, my next one here. Look, I'm leaning towards the same side of things. Looking at the receiver production against this Bengals team, number one guys have gone off, or a big central target has gone off through the passing game. Last 2 weeks, Pratt Freiermuth had 120 yards. We go back to the Baltimore Ravens, and Odell Beckham Jr. went for 116 yards. And we go to the Texans, and it was Noah Brown going off for 172 yards. There is clearly evidence here that when you lock in on a prime target here, they can go to absolute work against this secondary. So give me Calvin Ridley, who's been in warm form again lately, scoring touchdowns and stacking up yardage over 60.5. The first odd I mentioned there for Trevor Lawrence was at an even it was $2.10. This one is at an even $2. Calvin Ridley over 60.5 yards receiving against a Bengals depleted secondary.
Laz, I was going to go with a similar mindset, Evan Ingram over his total, because the Browns allowed the most receptions and second most receiving yards to opposing tight ends. Number was a little bit north of where I felt comfortable. I see we have a comment. John Roberts says he likes ETN over 2.5 receptions, a number he's hit every game this season. I'm worried about ETN's workload. Frankly, he was on the injury report, limited practice participant all week. I am on Dearness Johnson actually to go over his rushing yardage total. I think he's going to get as many carries as they can muster and still get away with the result. But my prop here for popular demand, Joe Mixon, running back on the other side, over 20.5 receiving yards at $2.05. Jacksonville allows the most receptions and third most receiving yards per game to opposing running backs. Mixon's gone over this total in 5 of his last 6. So give me Joe Mixon over 20.5 receiving yards at $2.05. You have a quarterback making his second career start, a defense that seems either unwilling to stop or willing to concede, catches out of the backfield, simplifying things as much as possible for Browning, giving him long handoffs to Joe Mixon over 20.5 receiving yards at $2.05. And you have to ask yourself, what are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
Well, Phil, let's hope week 13 isn't an unlucky one for our tips, but we've done it. We've soared through great audience participation. The comment block was hot again. We got to a bunch of them. For those that we didn't, we promise we will circulate those every single week. So jump in there. Make sure you're liking, commenting, subscribing to the ESPN Australia YouTube channel. We've got a ton of other shows here across the range of sports. Our incredibly talented colleagues here with the spiciest and most insightful takes. But Phil, we got like 30 seconds left on the clock here. What are we doing today? Landing the spaceship? We mooring the boat? We parking the big semi-trailer? What do we got for us?
It is a comfortable parallel park job, Laz. I got to be controlled
Gorgeous.
and measured and precise with my props because I've gone ice cold and you've closed the gap. $2.70 is my margin. It was once about $10 a few weeks ago. Brad Bolt saying he misses me on the sideline live at Monday Night Games. Brad, good news for you, pal. I'll be on the sidelines next week for Giants and Packers, but I'll be watching from the comfort of my own home like all of you. ESPN1, Monday Night Football, Bengals visiting the Jags, and on ESPN2, if you're keen, 2 screen options, in-season tournament doubleheader, 2 quarterfinal games. Should be a lot of fun. Pacers always fun to watch. But this is the NFL Brekkie Show, and Laz and I got to parallel park the car, land the spaceship, moor the boat. He's Laurie Horesh. I'm Phil Murphy. Thank you for joining us. We'll chat to you again next week.